Rush's original drummer John Rutsey was 55 at the time of his death in 2008. Following his departure from the band in 1974, after the release of their first album, Rutsey would be out of the rock and roll spotlight, all while his former band would become one of the biggest acts in the world. This is his story. John Rutsey would be born in 1952 in Toronto, Canada, and was the son of a crime reporter for a local newspaper. Rutsey would attend St. Patrick's School, where he met Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, and Lee wouldn't enter the musical picture until later on. Lifeson and Rutsey bonded over their love of rock music and played in a short-lived band called The Projection. Lifeson and Rutsey would stick together after the dissolution of The Projection and bring in Jeff Jones, who would front their new group. Their first gig would happen in September of 1968 at a youth center called The Coffin, which was found in the basement of an Anglican church in North York, which is an administrative district of Toronto. Ahead of the gig, the band had no name. According to author Bill Basiniewicz, he would write how they'd eventually get their name in his 1988 biography on the band titled Visions, saying the band was excited but they had a big problem. While they had been dreaming of playing, they had neglected to come up with a name for their group. So a few days before the gig, they sat around in John's basement trying to come up with an appropriate moniker. They weren't having much luck when John's older brother Bill piped up, "Why don't you call the band Rush?" And Rush it was, he'd say. Rush's first performance with Jeff Jones was successful, but on their next one, he would pull a no-show. Jones would end up leaving the band and was replaced with their old schoolmate Geddy Lee. Rush's first roadie, Ian Grandy, who was with the band until 1983, discussed a temporary direction Rutsey had them pursue in a 2009 interview with Guitar International magazine, saying John led the guys as far as being glam rockers with really flashy jackets and pants and 8-inch high boots. Grandy would then mention an anecdote about him and Rutsey catching up at the now legendary Toronto club, saying, "One time he was speaking to me at Gasworks and I said, 'Didn't we used to be the same height, 5'8"? He laughed and said, "Well, maybe a long time ago." In fact, Rush wouldn't always be a trio. By 1971, the band also experimented briefly with other members, including Lindy Young on keys, and incorporating Mitch Bossy as a second guitarist. Even at one point, Geddy Lee left the group and was replaced by bassist Joe Perna, but that didn't satisfy Rutsey, who brought Lee back. By the spring of 1971, the band cemented their lineup as a three-piece, at least for the next several years. It was also during this time that Rutsey sought a different direction for the band. On the podcast In Conversation with Chad Smith, Alex Lifeson would say this in 2013. John wanted to do more of a Bad Company or Small Faces sort of thing. That's the kind of music he was really into, the English bluesy kind of thing. We went for a while, for a few months. I remember we were at rehearsal and we told Mitch it really wasn't working out. He picked up his stuff and he left, he'd say. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Rush's early efforts were about to pay off, but they'd hit another dead end. An episode of the podcast series Full in Bloom in May of 2020 would feature Epic Records A&R man Tom Werman talking about his attempt to sign the band in the early 70s, saying, "I heard a demo and I went up to Toronto to see them. The manager picked me up, Ray Daniels. I think he managed Van Halen later on. I can't remember. I went backstage and said, 'This is incredible. This was very artsy. This wasn't your standard rock and roll. And I thought this would be really great signing for me because it's high class, and it's different.' So business affairs took over at that point to make a deal, and that's what usually happens. But the band wanted $75,000 advance for a 2-album deal. The label still had to pay for the recording, so I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with the business affairs. They just said, no, can't do it. By 1973, Rush would put out their first single. The first side would be their take on Buddy Holly's Not Fade Away, while the flip side would be You Can't Fight It, which was written by Lee and Rutsey. They'd followed it up in 1974 with their debut album, and both releases are put out on the band's own label, Moon Records. Lee and Lifeson had given Rutsey the role of Rush's main songwriter, but after coming up short, Lee took over and wrote lyrics for the songs just before they were recorded. Once their first album was finished, it gained traction in the United States when its final track, Working Man, became a hit in Cleveland, Ohio. That exposure would land Rush a deal with major label Mercury Records. But Rutsey's time with the band would ultimately come to a close. On top of his contentment staying local and unwillingness to adapt to Lee and Lifeson's new progressive rock approach, he wasn't keeping his type 1 diabetes under control and decided to leave. After Rush, Rutsey continued living a normal life in his hometown, with Lifeson telling Rockline Radio in 1989, "John's still around. I see John quite often. He gave up playing shortly after he left the band and went into bodybuilding. He competed on an amateur level for a while, doing that for a few years, and has sort of been in and out of that, but he still works out, and I work with him a few times a week at a local gym at a Gold's here in Toronto. He would end up being replaced by drummer Neil Peart, who would be with the band until his death until a few years ago. Then in 2005, when interviewed on an episode of VH1's classic Hangin' with Lifeson, he would say, "I haven't seen John in about 15 years. The last time I saw him, he was living his life," adding, "I think he's happy with the decision he made. He wasn't kicked out, he made a decision on his own." 3 years after that interview, Rutsey was found dead after suffering a heart attack in his sleep, which was widely believed to be connected to his lifelong struggle with diabetes. Lifeson and Lee would post a heartfelt tribute to Rutsey on Rush's website, saying, "Our memories of the early years of Rush when John was in the band are very fond to us. Those years spent in our teens dreaming of one day doing what we continue to do decades later are special. Although our paths diverged many years ago, we smile today, thinking back on those exciting times and remembering John's wonderful sense of humor and impeccable timing. He will be deeply missed by all he touched." That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.